I'll give him this seat.
Why, is it cold over there?
This is the
Uncomfortable.
Thursday, October 22nd, Situate Planning Board meeting, and we have an agenda that was posted. Do we have a second on the agenda?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay. First item on the agenda tonight is the public hearing for a zoning article for special town meeting on microbreweries. And
Do you want to read the public hearing notice?
do I read the whole thing?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. All right, a little housekeeping then. This is the legal notice of the notice of public hearing on proposed changes to the zoning bylaw, Situate Planning Board. Notice is hereby given pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5, that a public hearing will be held by the Situate Planning Board on Thursday, October 22nd, 2015, at 7:30 p.m. in the Selectmen's Hearing Room, Town Hall, 600 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, Situate, Massachusetts, to consider amendments to the Situate zoning bylaw as described below. These amendments will appear as articles on the warrant for the special town meeting commencing November 2nd, 2014. All references below to sections refer to the sections of the bylaw. So number one, by petition, microbrewery to amend the zoning bylaw. The proposed changes include A, amend section 200 definitions by adding a new definition of microbrewery. B, amend section 420 table of use regulations by adding microbrewery under the commercial uses category, prohibited in the residential zoning districts and subject to a special permit in the GB, HB, and C zoning districts. And C, amend section 440.5 business districts to allow for outdoor seating at a microbrewery as already allowed for with hotels and restaurants. The text of the current zoning bylaw, the current zoning map, the complete text of the proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw are available for inspection during the normal business hours, normal hours of business of the Situate Town Hall at the offices of the Town Clerk and the Planning Board at Town Hall, 600 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, Situate, Mass. All persons wishing to comment on the proposed zoning amendment should appear at the public hearing, this hearing, at this time and place designated above. Written comments on the zoning amendment will also be accepted by the Planning Board prior to the public hearing. So if we don't have them, it's too late. Okay. So,
It's standing room only.
Want me to sit right here?
yes, please.
Same seat.
Please identify yourself.
Yes, my name is Ross Elder, 21 Sedgebrook Drive, Situate. The reason that are interested in amending the bylaws, as you just, in the way that you just pointed out, is that my son Matt made a career change a couple of years ago, went from the whirling, swirling world of the corporate world and decided to follow his passion and become a brewer. He has worked for the last 2 years as a brewer at one of the largest microbreweries in the Pacific Northwest. His goal has always been to open up his own facility, and along with that goal is to do it somewhere in the South Shore, but specifically in Situate. With him being out west and me being here, I've been doing a lot of the legwork for him, looking for a location. We have looked at numerous towns and numerous locations, but the focus has always been on Situate. Microbreweries by nature are local entities. This will be a locally owned, locally operated facility. It's going to be a small microbrewery. It's going to, we think, has a very good chance of becoming a very integral part of the community. We've found a location in the Greenbush area that we think would be ideal. Greenbush is already, as you know, in the business district. There's a number of varied and diverse businesses already there, and we think the microbrewery would fit in perfectly in that environment. In order to do that, though, there's never been, I guess, occasion to address a microbrewery because it's still a fairly new industry. So we would like to amend the bylaw so we could open up a microbrewery in the general business, or commercial districts. So what we are proposing are three, what we think are, fairly minor changes to the zoning bylaws, adding the definition of what a microbrewery is to the definition section, adding a microbrewery in section 420 as a regulated use in those districts, and then the last part of it is section 440.5 that already allows for outdoor seating at hotels or restaurants. We would just like to add microbrewery to that group, so it'd be hotels, restaurants, or a microbrewery can have outdoor seating. The zoning law, if it's passed, would still be subject to a special permit. So we think we've tried anyways to cover pretty much all the bases. We've received tremendous support. The EDC, as Ann can attest to, has given us 100% unanimous support. I appeared before the Board of Selectmen, same response there. I was here, not that long ago, 2 weeks ago, and I think I got the same type of support here. Went before the advisory committee, and they voted 100% in favor of supporting it also. So the response both inside Town Hall and outside Town Hall has been very, very enheartening. We had 175 signers to the petition, and each and every one of them was very excited about the prospects of Situate having its own microbrewery. We feel it's going to be a great addition to the community. It's an exciting business. It's a vibrant business. It's a unique business. It's going to be Situate's own business, Situate's own microbrewery, so to speak. We feel there's a lot of opportunities to draw people to the town, to visit the microbrewery. It's going to create new jobs, new tax dollars, and I think it'd be a great addition to the town. Like I said, my son's been doing this as a profession for 2 years and is a very proficient brewer and a good business person. He's got his MBA, and he's a very, of course, I'm a little biased, I suppose, but he's a very bright kid.
Great, thank you. Laura, did you have any?
I was at most of the Economic Development Committee meetings when Mr. Elder presented this proposal, and I agree that they were very supportive of it. When the board talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I think there were only a couple of questions that came up. One of them was about odors, and I did get in touch with Lee Hartman, the planning director in Plymouth. He told me that the Mayflower Brewing Company and two others, whose names I don't remember, had all been in Plymouth for a while, and there weren't any complaints about odors or, any problem that he could see. So,
That's good.
yeah, that was good news.
Mhm.
Great. Maybe I can go out of order because we've had a chance to talk about this at least last time and see if there are any comments from the public. Well, that was quick.
Not all at once.
All right, Richard?
Well, I'm very supportive of this. I just had a quick question.
Sure.
There was, I'm trying to remember, I think it was the Boston Globe had an article recently about a gentleman that was from the Northwest that had just recently come to the South Shore, but he was actually located in Hingham for the time being, but he was looking for a place. That was not your son, right?
No,
It was
no.
coincidence?
Unless he's doing something I'm not aware
Okay.
of, but no.
It was just very interesting, because it was like a couple days after we had the last meeting, the planning board meeting, and I thought,
Oh, interesting.
wow,
No,
that
I didn't-
sounds, and it-
How long ago was that in the Globe? Do you remember?
it was,
Less
when was
than
our
2
last
weeks?
meeting, the 8th?
Yeah.
So it was like maybe on the 10th or
Oh,
something?
interesting. No, I didn't see that. I know there's a microbrewery that is kind of based in Hingham, and I may have talked about this before, but they actually do all their brewing out of a brewery in Ipswich.
Right.
They do this contract brewing, so I'm not sure if that's the same fellow or not,
Yeah,
but...
it was, and it was in the business section about entrepreneurship, and it was about, so anyway, it doesn't matter. It's
I
not
think
your
I did
son.
see that,
I was
yeah.
just curious.
No, yeah.
Because it sounded very familiar, because he had come from, done work in the Northwest, and he had come here, and he was trying to find something, start a microbrewery on the South Shore.
Oh, really?
And the way the article was sounding, he hadn't decided where it was going to be, but he was located in Hingham.
Interesting.
So.
No, I didn't see that.
So, no, I think it's all the above that you said, economic development, the use is great. Actually, even I was driving around after our meeting, I went to Fitz Mill, and I know you're thinking about that area.
Yes.
And I thought, hey, the mill, barley, wheat, it's kind of, it actually even fits in that whole sort of theme there. So I think it would be a very appropriate location.
Thanks.
I'm in the fold already. I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense. It's an opportunity both for you and your son as well as for the town.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly that aspect. Russ and I have talked several times in the building department and been enthusiastic from day one. I also really love the fact that it's a branding opportunity, if you will, for the town, as well as, all of the other good aspects of it. I think it could put a very nice message out to the wider world, that we're an interesting, worthwhile place to have as a destination for a day trip or a longer vacation, whatever it might be. So,
And I know I mentioned it, I'm not sure I mentioned it to this group, but my son's got some pretty interesting ideas for labeling on some of the beers that are going to tie into the town of Situate. So I think that's going to be pretty cool,
I
too.
could see that, absolutely. So I'm all for it, definitely.
And I am as well. I think it is something, it's exciting, it's new, you've done your homework, and you've got quite a road ahead of you, but this is exactly what the Economic Development Committee was charged with doing, is hopefully bringing forward new business, tax dollars, and you are filling that bill. And I am in full support of what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It means a lot to me from all of you.
Yeah, and finally, I'll add my voice to that. I'm certainly very much in favor of this. I spent a week or so up in Vermont this weekend, a few weeks ago,
The Mecca.
and it's a very interesting opportunity to hit some of these microbreweries. They're really sort of tourist destinations in a lot of ways, so I think it'll help sort of put Situate on the map to the extent that it isn't already on the map. I should point out that what we're proposing here is a change to the town bylaws that will make, microbreweries available to anybody who wants to propose a microbrewery, but we certainly hope you're successful in moving it forward.
Thanks.
With that, I think I need a motion to close the public hearing.
Yeah, we have a motion that has several parts to it. One of the parts is closing the public hearing. The other one is the planning board report.
Yep.
I don't know if, we sent this out?
You did.
Yeah, Ann's looking like,
Oh, I've been out of town. What can I tell you?
do you need a copy of it? I mean, do you have it? It should be in the packet.
No, I didn't send it for everybody.
Oh, you didn't?
It was in an email sent
Well,
Tuesday, the
why don't you
20th.
Take this one, let's pass that one down. I tried to keep this short because I know that's your preference, that you
Keep
don't
it
want
simple.
to be like reading a huge treatise when you're up there. On the other hand, the good thing about having one report that you all agree on and vote on, if you choose to do that, is that it's really your statement collectively as a board.
Would you like me to read this?
Sure.
Okay.
Close the public hearing first.
Move to close,
Oh, okay, well, yeah, we did the motion with the closing the public hearing and and accepting the report all in one
All
motion.
together. Okay.
okay,
So-
all right.
Go ahead.
All right, Article 17, microbrewery. The planning board hereby reports that in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, a public hearing was held on this article on October 22, 2015, at which time the public hearing was closed and the board voted unanimously to support passage of the article at the November 2nd, 2015 special town meeting. The planning board, together with many town officials, including the Economic Development Commission, is acutely aware of the need to expand the tax base by adding business and attracting new development. This article would allow a unique type of business, a microbrewery, in the business and commercial zoning districts which can readily absorb additional growth. The planning board supports passage of this article because it will encourage a type of business that will benefit the town by creating new jobs, stimulating tourism, and expanding the tax base.
I couldn't have said it better.
Okay, so we have a... I just saw it, okay. So
Confusion amongst the motion.
Oh, that's good. It's a short one. I move to close the public hearing and vote the town meeting report on the proposed zoning article to be delivered at the 2015 special town meeting as written.
I'll second that.
Been seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Great.
Enthusiastic?
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you all, appreciate it very much.
Do you want this signed, Laura?
They have a note here.
Good luck, Ross.
Yeah, good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck to you and your son.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
I look forward to it opening.
Yes. So do we.
Okay, well, we've still got 20-some-odd minutes before the stormwater discussion.
You can do accounting and...
Yeah, let's-
Yeah, liaison and everything.
Let's move to accounting.
You know, another tie-in with that, you know, he was talking about local, I know they're trying to get those cranberry bogs on Old Buck, or Old,
Old
oh,
Oak
thank
Bucket,
you.
yes.
Old Bucket, Old Bucket Road, Old Oaken Bucket Road. That would be a nice tie-in to have a nice little cranberry beer or something, you know, from local cranberry bogs.
Sure. I can see some sort of Lucky Finn beer, for that matter.
Just something to go with the Duxbury oysters.
Yeah.
All right, I move that we pay $10 to RJB Development Corporation for the refund. Why is it a refund?
Because we collected a little bit more money than we used.
Oh, so this actually isn't a paying, it's a,
Yeah, no.
oh, it's paying them, okay, I'm sorry. $10 to pay for, as a refund from the planning board guarantee account for unexpected funds from the stormwater permit review. This is to RGB Development Corporation. And then $1,505 to the Susan A. Phiffen Trust for the return of unexpended funds in the planning board guarantee deposit account for permitting for 35 Dreamwald, the common driveway.
You have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
How about minutes? We have some minutes
We do.
to approve?
Richard's got them.
This is from our last planning board meeting, that was, I know that Karen sent this out to all of us. I vote that we approve the Situate Planning Board minutes for October 8th, 2015.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I abstain, I was not here.
I abstain, I was not here.
Okay.
I was here, I'll vote twice.
I think we just need to
Actually,
be on that.
members absent, Mr. Vogel and Ann Burbine.
Well, will you agree with that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. How about liaison reports? Anybody?
It's not necessarily a liaison report, but I know last time, thank you, Bill, by the way, for sending out the New England Boat Show for Situate.
Yeah.
I must say, personally, I was just a tad bit disappointed because I felt like Chronicle, personally, in my mind, had done actually a much better job of showcasing the town. They've done some really nice shows on Situate. And I felt like, well, maybe because I'm not a boater, like, it didn't really touch on some of the things that I felt like were the strong points of Situate.
It's a boat show.
I know, but it was from the voter's point of view, I know. But I guess everyone really liked it. They thought it was, did everyone get a chance to see it?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was,
Once again.
like I said, I don't mean it was bad in any way, it was excellent. I was just maybe expecting something more of a marketing piece. I didn't think it was really heavily
I think it was really
marketing.
focused on the boating side of it.
Yeah.
And that was the objective, right? So.
I think, and that's.
If I had anything negative to say, was the fact that they really didn't touch on the North Situate Harbor. Nor did they get into Greenbush, they really kind of just did the harbor itself.
Yeah, true.
And-
That's the harbor.
Well,
They also miscaptioned a picture of the Welch Company.
Well, and I want to say they talked about Oro. They didn't have the chef. They did have Michael from Riva, which was good. And I'm trying to think, the one on, the Oro one was really short. And they did what? Cookstus? The wood carving?
Yeah.
The Riva, Oro, the Marina. But even Angela and I were talking like, oh, they didn't mention like the Mill Wharf or,
Right, yeah.
You know,
There's several.
yeah, that's kind of like
I think
the
they mentioned the Barker.
iconic. I don't remember them mentioning the
I
Barker,
think it was
actually.
just in passing.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
But even so, I think it was equal to the write-ups of the other, venues that they had presented. So to be in a small, pretty elite group, in that group, I think is a real nice thing. But I agree, you can always, it's not like we're prejudiced or anything.
Well, and on other, I don't know if the EDC knows this, but in Boston Magazine, they had an article on Boston's best bars, like hangout bars for people over 40 or maybe even over 50, I can't remember.
Over 60.
I think it was over 40. And Tesoro Latin Kitchen was there, and there was really almost nothing mentioned outside the city. Almost everything in that article was completely Boston. There was
I
like,
saw that on the Latin Kitchen.
Yeah.
I was really impressed that they picked up a bar in Situate.
yeah, because it was very random. There was nothing in, like, let's say, nothing in Cambridge or Newton or Somerville or, there was all these bars like in the Back Bay, South End, that you think, okay, this is like the sophisticated crowd. And then they were like, oh, and this is Tesoro Latin Kitchen in Situate. And I was like, wow, that was really impressive.
Well,
So-
it means somebody on the staff lives in Situate.
You're probably
Got
right.
lost in Cambria one day.
But
Yeah, really.
all I'm,
It's still stuck here.
all I'm doing is reporting on
He's enjoying
good economic development or good marketing news, basically.
Yep.
We have extra copies of the magazine, and we have like a stack like this of the magazine, so if
Oh,
you
really?
all like them, yeah.
Oh, that's great. How did you get that?
Oh, connections. No, it's through the EDC.
Oh, okay.
The EDC had them, they were, I think, looking for a place to store some of them, but they have a huge stack of them. And I think their intent is to take both the footage and the magazine to the boat show and have that, have the footage running, as some kind of a loop.
Oh, nice.
And have the magazine available at the boat show.
Yeah.
And that's like, seems like the perfect venue, and it's in February, so it's a little ways out, but.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. Okay.
Just in time for the town planner report.
Let's see. We're working on a lot of different types of plans. We're in the process of updating the hazard mitigation plan that gives us the foundation to get all the grants from FEMA. There's a climate action plan that we're working on with Situate and Duxbury through MAPC. We're supposed to have a meeting on Tuesday with the department heads, but that's going to be put off because they're not ready for that yet. Although we'll still have DRT on Tuesday. The Mass Cultural Council, I think, is poised to give Situate, unless they've done it already, the cultural district designation for Situate Harbor, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
And there should be some signage and some, maybe little banners and those types of things that go up that indicate that. The EDC is also working on wayfinding, which involves a kind of a consistent theme of signs throughout Situate, from everything like the the parking in Cole Parkway, which right now is on one of these kind of funky green, very institutional-looking signs, to, they're looking at the signs for the schools, the signs for the town hall, the library, possibly some of the open space like the town forest, which has that ginormous sign on Route 3A. Instead of that, have like some little pretty discreet sign. So their consultant is working on all that right now. The Design Review Committee has been really interested in all of that, so hopefully they'll see it and they'll like it. I think the EDC is going to be presenting their wayfinding to the selectmen in the next month or so they, make sure they get the buy-in that they need before this can be done. And
Speaking of signage, if I may ask, I know that there's a process right now in place where the DPW is replacing street signs with a new Situate, or I should say Situate, right? But I guess they're state-recommended signs, right? With the
Yeah,
seal.
it's federal, actually.
Signs?
Yeah.
But I was wondering, I know I've heard a couple people on Facebook ask about this. Is there a plan or a program to say, like, how they're replacing it? Because sometimes it does seem to be kind of random. And I've also noticed that some streets are getting the cross signs and other ones aren't. So, like-
Yeah, I saw that post also,
Okay.
and I don't know what the answer is to that. I really just don't know.
So it's
but
really, the DPW is in charge of
the
that?
DPW is in charge of that.
Okay.
I think it's governed by how much money they have, how much time they have. I think the plan is that they're slowly replacing all the signs in town so that they'll conform to the new federal highway standards. I think they have to do that to get federal money for the roads. So they're in the process of doing that, but it's going to take a while. And what the order is, I don't know.
Right. Well, and like I said, I just was curious also as to like what constitutes like when they actually, like on Gannett Road, some of the intersections had Gannett and, let's say, is it Three Ring Road, I think it comes in there?
Yeah.
Like, it was nice. I was like, wow, they actually have two. But it only did that like one or two times. Then the rest, you're like, that's a constant thing in New England where it only shows you it never shows you the road you're on. It only shows you the road, the cross streets.
Yeah.
So
And why
I was
do you
just
get
curious
lost?
as to why certain ones were showing both signs, because I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, I don't know if it's major intersections. I mean, that's what I would guess, but I just don't know.
Well, if you don't know where you're going, we sure as heck are not going to tell you.
Yeah, see, that's a very New England,
One of the preparations that was made in England when they thought that the Germans might be invading them in beginning of World War II was to remove all of the street signs so that nobody'd know where they were going. Couldn't give people directions.
I guess in this day of GPS, maybe it doesn't matter, but I guess there are those of us that
Yeah,
still
probably
use
do.
street signs.
But it would be nice to have signage that directed people off of Route 3 to Situate.
That's one of the places that he's looking to do.
Really, it is just untenable that there is no sign on Route 3 that says Situate.
Well, except for the building.
Oh, on Route 3, yeah,
On Route 3.
yeah.
No,
Oh, on
this is,
Route
I think
3,
they-
beg your pardon, not 3.
Yeah, I think they
You're right.
have to go through DOT to get that.
you know what's interesting? I was thinking about that just a few days ago, because when you're driving south, there's a sign for exit 12 that says Nantasket, right? And Nantasket's nowhere near Route 3. I mean, you have to go all the way through Hingham to
Yeah.
get to Nantasket. But that's the only sign that I saw that didn't really conform to immediately off the exit. This is, Hanover, I think it says Hanover 53, like right there. Or if you're in Hingham, it says Hingham, Derby Street.
I thought the one that came off at the Hanover Mall at one point in
It
time
did.
said
It
Situate.
did say Situate.
But
yeah.
they changed it and it doesn't now?
No, they removed that. It was there until they did the new signs.
Okay.
And so that, right now, coming south or either south or north on 3, there's absolutely no signage whatsoever. So Ann is correct. It would be nice to have something.
And there's only one sign just before the Rotary in Hingham that says Situate, right by Stars. That's it. So,
So is this something that the EDC is looking at? So you talked about like sort of townwide
They have
wayfinding?
talked about Route
Yes, we
3
have.
and signage on Route
yes,
3.
we have. And actually, I have spoken informally with Cantwell about this, and they were meeting with DOT, so I don't know if anything came out of that. But I think it's really important. I mean, here we have a golf course, not to be off on a tangent, and there is not one sign that says Widows Walk this way. Not one sign. Whether you want to play golf or not, there is no sign.
There were a lot of people there today when I drove by.
I understand
day
that.
People
for it.
have discovered it.
They have discovered it, but this is, whether it's typical New England or not, our signage in the Commonwealth leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, just go up Route 128. It's Route 1, it's Route 128, it's Route something,
93, it's
93. And, you know, I mean, really, if you're from out of state, you're in tough straits.
We also have a couple of dates to decide on. There's a meeting that's going to be the second meeting in December. Because of Christmas, that's always shifted. So it could be either December 17th, which is a Thursday, I think that would be the third Thursday instead of the fourth, or we could do December 22nd, which is the Tuesday before Christmas. So I don't know which of those people.
17th.
The 17th.
20 seconds.
Yeah.
A little
Too
too-
close.
Too close.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And I think that's about it.
It's about when I'll be starting my Christmas shopping.
Ho, ho, ho.
Okay. Well, we've still got 10 minutes. We need to wait till, it doesn't look like we've got anybody here for it, so why don't we wait?
I saw
There might be some people out
Steve was
there.
out
I
in the
think they're
hall.
all out there. We can, you want to bring them in? Yeah.
Let's just advance it.
Yeah, let's keep it moving.
As long as we go past
Some
8:15.
coffee?
Where are you going to get coffee?
Fiore, Dunkin' Donuts. Fiore's is open for sure. I don't know if the one down the road is still open.
So what do you guys think about this, like, having stormwater and beer? Is there something that's being said there, like there's a storm brewing?
Oh,
stop it.
Yeah, I like that. I had a dream about that last night.
Kidding.
I think we should be able to talk them into doing what they did with Little's Walk, and that was just have a contest to name the cool golf course.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Back up and have a townwide competition to name one of the beers.
I think
That's a
that's
nice
a great,
idea.
that's
I
a great
really like his
idea.
idea of,
I have a list of 20 already.
well, the Army of Two, or whatever they was gonna call it, talking about British ingredients and American ingredients, about the Abigail sisters, I'm sorry, the Bates sisters.
I wanted to see Situate Light with the lighthouse and a light beer.
That's a really good idea, too.
Yeah,
I can see that this has been given some thought.
there are so many.
I don't think that's necessarily one that they've thought of, but they could.
I was just thinking something like Irish moss.
That does not sound appealing.
Green beer.
A rolling rock gathers no Irish moss, or, you know.
Dory Ale.
I can remember sitting out in a small little pub overlooking the water in Seattle, deciding I was going to start with Aviator and work my way through.
Exenatu.
I think I got down to about H.
Okay. Is this the, do you have others coming?
We still-
Can we get started, or should we wait for, do you have others?
If you have anything else you can do, that...
We've done it all. You're the last one on the agenda.
Talk some more about the microbrewery.
Probably all breweried out by now, I imagine.
It's hard to do.
Why don't we see if we can get started, and latecomers can jump in if they would like to. And let me just start off. Just give me a minute to sort of frame the discussion. First of all, I wanted to thank everybody for the input that they provided, both in writing and I expect to hear tonight, about both the Situate stormwater bylaw and regulations. We understand here that what's developed on paper sometimes doesn't work completely in the practical world, and I think we're always open to hearing comments and suggestions for improving what we have, and so we appreciate your being here tonight to that input. And I wanted to sort of balance that out by saying, we also recognize that the bylaw and the regulations were developed by a pretty broad range of stakeholders, including, local citizens, town officials, town staff, regulators, whether they're federal or state, environmental groups. So there's a lot of stakeholders involved in what this bylaw does and says. And I think we'll take your input tonight as sort of the beginning of that kind of input. And there's probably more to be had after this. But we certainly appreciate you bringing it forward to us tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and let you sort of frame your comments.
Sure, I'll give it a shot, and hopefully it'll be somewhat informal, but for the record, Steve Bjorklund, local developer, and been working in Situate for probably 30 years. Most of the stuff that I've been involved in this town is subdivisions and reconstructing houses. So I wasn't completely involved in the stormwater bylaw when it first came out because it wasn't affecting things that I was doing at the time. But I have recently purchased some property in town that is a vacant lot, a half-acre lot. We have under contract, we haven't purchased it yet, but we hired Ross Engineering to come forward and prepare a stormwater plan for us on this particular lot. And in doing so, I tend to pick these regulations apart for every comma and every period that's in them and find out what seems to be right and what seems to be incorrect. And in doing so, we found out that to actually meet the letter of what's in the bylaw, it's virtually impossible to do that in certain circumstances. And a lot of that revolves around the size of the lots that we're working on. This particular instance, we have a lot that's 20,000 square feet. By the time we designed the system to meet the regulations or come close to meeting the regulations, we had to clear every single tree on site, raise the entire site up 3 to 4 feet in elevation, create a 5,000-foot ponding area in the backyard and 2 ponding areas in the front yard. Realized by the time we were done meeting the regulation, we'll never be able to sell the house once the house goes up. Me being the way I am, I tend to go after the regulation at that point and find out what's wrong with this, why isn't it working, and what might work better in some of these situations. And I will stress that while I'm the one that tends to be the catalyst in something like this, it's not necessarily for this one particular lot. I started to do some research on what other people have run up against and some of the costs that have been involved for an individual homeowner or somebody who wants to construct a single-family dwelling, what it would cost them to properly engineer under the regulations and the bylaw and actually go out and construct what it is that gets approved in that particular, for instance. And have found that there are people who are spending over $50,000 in an attempt to try to meet this bylaw. And at that point, it just seems to me to be, I guess for lack of a better term, an unfair burden on an individual lot owner in the town or somebody who might want to do an addition on their home that kicks in certain requirements of this bylaw. Again, the way that it's written right now. And I think it's been in place, Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 7 years?
Yeah.
About 7 years, give or take. I'm not sure the exact amount of permits that have been issued because some come through the planning board, some come through the Conservation Commission, but probably somewhere in the vicinity of maybe 30 to 50 permits or something like that. And I haven't researched all 30 to 50 permits to find out what everything has cost, but the ones I have were enough to tell me that there's definitely room for some type of improvements to make it a more usable bylaw. And I appreciate the comments you started with, Steve, saying that, we kind of went into this, head first and passed this bylaw. Cohasset did the same thing. And the residents in Cohasset got together after a number of years of having the bylaw in place and actually reworked their whole bylaw. So we're kind of following suit with that, and in a lot of the research that I did was actually internal to the town hall, both with Laura's help and Pat's help, and Neil Duggan's help as well, finding out that, yeah, there really is some room to make some changes here. So we agreed to come forward to the planning board, and I got together with Greg Tansey from Ross Engineering, who does a lot of the engineering for me. Unfortunately, Greg Morse was going to be here tonight, and he had a problem at home, so he couldn't make it, but I believe we have his comments anyways. And I do appreciate the fact that both Pat and Laura have met informally with us, basically at this table, to preempt them on what we were trying to do. We've actually spent a number of hours going through this, and I'm sure she'll have some feedback on some of this stuff as it goes forward. But again, my whole catalyst was to try to bring something forward in a timely fashion so that we can actually make the changes prior to the Springtown meeting and have the planning board actually bring the article forward with the changes rather than some type of a citizen's petition. And I think once you hear from the engineers and possibly Laura and Pat, you'll probably agree a certain amount of these changes should be made. Some of them obviously are going to be up for discussion, whether they make sense to change or not. I'm going to push for as much change as I can, but still leave a reasonable bylaw in town that's going to make it so people don't get flooded out. And that's where I'm hoping the board will work with me as well as the other people that are in the room to find out the proper way to do that. So tonight, you're correct, is really just a kind of an introduction to some of the issues that are in the bylaw. And you're right, Steve, there will definitely be more as more people get a chance to look at it, and as we look at it a little bit deeper. There's definitely going to be more stuff. So we're hoping that maybe some workshops will come out of this, or something that just makes it fair for the homeowner, or me as a developer who has to pass the cost on to a homeowner, to make it somewhat reasonable. And I understand a lot of this revolves around the CRS rating program and making sure that, you know, we get credits and things like that. So I've actually taken some time, while very short. I will know more about the community rating system than probably 99% of the people in town by the time I'm done with it. But there are some changes that can be made that will probably not affect that program greatly, but it will definitely affect the lives and the pocketbooks of some of the homeowners who are trying to build on their property. And I think that if we can find an even balance between the two of them, I think it's going to be much better than what we have right now. And I can say that a lot of the stuff that's been implemented, while people come in here to get a permit, I know you guys are really pressed. Laura's doing 10 million things. She certainly is not going to be going out and ensuring that this stuff is being done properly after it's permitted. I know from personal experience that there are projects out there that have been permitted that there's no way that they can meet the conditions that have been put on them, but nobody has the time to go and check it anyways. So I think if it's more reasonable, it's going to be easier for people to comply with something rather than be overburdensome and have, you know, a ton of inspections on these things and stuff like that. And again, I'm pretty much referring to the single-family home developments. If it's a subdivision and you're coming in, you're dividing, you're building a big detention basin, I understand 100-year storm events, I understand all that stuff, and that makes a lot of sense because you have a ton of water that's coming from a subdivision that needs to be controlled in that manner. Same as a commercial development or a business development, a retail or anything like that. Those type of sites can be treated differently in the bylaw than a small single-family home that doesn't produce the same type of pollutants or anything like that. So, you know, if I can, probably if Greg will come up here with me, he's got some comments that he had made, and if the board wants to throw questions out really at any time, again, I'm only one player in the mix, and then at some point, I'll go through, and I don't know if Laura was able to give you copies of this. I came in today because Grady Associates just, all right, so everybody has a copy of the letter from Grady?
Yes.
And I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read it or not, but...
Admit I haven't read it yet, but...
Yeah, we got it
we just
a
got
little
it.
late, and we
Okay,
just
so
distributed.
so far, there's really been 3 engineers that have kind of kicked in basically free time to try to help correct some of these things. And as I go through all the letters that, each of the engineers did, they're pretty similar in where the problems lie. So it's not just one person having a problem with the bylaw or one engineer having a problem. And I do know we want to bring consulting engineers in, which we talked about at the workshop meeting. We have no problem with that. I mean, we'd love to see the consulting engineers, chime in on this and find out. Obviously, they want to represent the town when they come in and make sure that the town is going to be protected. But I still think there's plenty of room in the middle of this thing to not go all the way on one side, not go all the way on the other, and have a workable bylaw. So I guess as kind of the self-proclaimed spokesperson getting it going, I now hope that everybody will start to, chime in on it, and as well as board members. If you've gone through it, you've seen the plans that have come through, and some of them certainly are extremely onerous. One of the biggest issues is a 100-year storm event on a single-family home site. And one quick example I'll give you is, I know there's a driveway on First Parish Road, and they have, I believe it's 156 infiltrators for one driveway. And the design was over $22,000, and the construction was over $30,000 for one driveway. So it just seems that's a little bit much for a storm that we may never see in our lifetime, and if we do, it's going to be one day. So I'm hoping, and I think Laura's in agreement, the 100-year storm event in certain circumstances is definitely onerous on an individual, lot. And we haven't done anything on a 10,000 square foot lot, so I don't know what's going to happen on that. When you're in the West End and you're on a 1 acre lot or an acre and a half, 2 acre lot, you don't have that much of a problem with the storm runoff because there's so much woods left around it or area around the house. The issue really, what we're finding, is in the middle of town where you've got the half-acre lot. And we don't want to go clear all the trees on a half-acre lot. I know the neighbors don't want to have the developer come in and clear all the trees because we tend to be the bad guy because we have to meet the regulation. We didn't make the regulation, but in order to adhere to that regulation, it's going to look horrible in certain circumstances. And I think if the neighbors understand that, there's going to be no problem at all with the changes that come out of this bylaw. I think they're going to be happier when the bylaw is corrected.
Good. Well, thank you for your introduction. And I think what I'd like to do now is just turn it over to Laura and get her sort of insights at this point. And then we can open it up to the board and other comments.
Okay. This bylaw has some history by now that I think maybe most people are aware of, but just to kind of go over it in case anybody isn't aware. Situate has a lot of surface water resources. They have drinking water that comes from a surface water reservoir. The other drinking water comes from groundwater. All of those resources can be affected by stormwater. So the idea behind the bylaw was you can't obviously eliminate stormwater, but to try to infiltrate it so you collect it in your groundwater, to try to prevent it from affecting neighboring lots, and to try to control any kind of contamination that would be possible coming from it. So those are the thrusts of where this bylaw, what this bylaw was intended to do. It wasn't actually written by the town, by anybody in town. It came from the Regional Planning Agency, and it was kind of a one-size-fits-all for Marshfield, Cohasset, and Situate. And the North-South River Watershed Association was, I think, key in getting it adopted. I think if they hadn't supported it, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. So it has some environmental aspects to it. It also helps prevent some of the flooding that we heard about in the planning office pretty much weekly. And I think that has a lot to do with just the unique aspects of Situate, that the soils are tight, groundwater is high. Because groundwater is high, a lot of times you have to have a mounded septic system. All of those create higher grades compared to a neighboring property, and there's potential for people to get stormwater that they never had before. flowing over onto their lot. So we're trying to control that. I think everyone is aware that there are costs associated with this, and that's not something that we want to do to people. It's just, part of the nature of it. To really look at stormwater, you have to have engineers, reviewing it, and there's a cost to that. I think everyone also wants to have a balance between what's regulated and what the costs are, so that it's not onerous for people. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. The consulting engineers were contacted about all of this, and they all agreed to do some work on it with, Steve and Mark, or whoever represents, the whole group of people that are affected by it, and whoever else wants to be involved from the town. They were willing to donate their time and just, not like endless amounts of it, but at least for several meetings. I know they think that the 100-year storm is a problem, that, however that got in there, that's really just too high of a bar for, for a single-family home to meet. I think there are probably some other things in there that they're also going to agree. There are probably things that they're not going to agree with, all of you. So I think it's going to be, finding a balance, but finding something that still protects the town's resources, and hopefully that's where we end up at the end. It was also mentioned that, by town officials, that we should involve a lot of town officials with this. It shouldn't just be planning. It should involve DPW. If building wants to be involved, they should be involved. Anybody who reviews development that wants to be part of this should be part of it, and hopefully we can do that. I mean, I think that will make it stronger coming from the town and coming from you if there are more people involved with it.
That was kind of why I mentioned that there were multiple stakeholders here, and that we need to get everybody involved, not just one particular view on this. And I think that's definitely a direction we need to go here.
Great. So that's really about all I had to say.
Okay.
Just, can I ask a follow-up question on what Laura said? Originally, you mentioned it was Cohasset, Marshfield, and Situate, but I believe that Marshfield didn't adopt it? I thought that was the case, or did they?
They definitely didn't adopt it for the whole town. I think they have something in Marshfield Hills, but it's like it's just tailored to that area, and I'm not sure if it has any relationship to this other bylaw.
So, right now, Cohasset, as what Steve was saying, has redone theirs. Is that
Apparently
on the books?
so, yeah.
Yeah.
And Marshfield doesn't really have it in place, as far as we know.
No, but I mean, there are a lot of towns in Massachusetts that have stormwater bylaws.
Right,
and
I'm just saying this particular one that we kind of was the template. You'd mentioned it was...
Yeah, I think Belmont's is similar to this. I think there may be other towns in MAPC that have something similar, but I don't know all of them.
Okay.
Maybe I can ask Pat, I see that Pat sitting over there quietly, if you would like to come up and make some statements here
Having come from a
too.
town that didn't have a stormwater bylaw for smaller projects, I was really glad to come here and see one in place. And I agree with what Laura was saying, is we don't want to gut the whole thing. We've also had conversations with our review engineers who agree with Steve and some of the other engineers that there are areas we can improve it. So I think, we'd like to do that. And for conservation, I've seen it really work well for a handful since I've been here of really difficult sites with single-family homes on them, where if we didn't have this, we wouldn't have been able to regulate the stormwater anywhere near as well as we could have. And it saves some. But on the other hand, there's lots like Steve described, which, they're extreme that they're out there, that you really are going to put a burden on a homeowner for a 100-year storm for a single-family lot. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to working with whoever on this.
Great. And let me ask Tricia if she would like to say anything on this. I saw you sneak in over there, so.
No, I think that, clearly my office has an interest as well. I think whenever we try something new, after we've lived with it for a few years, we should take an opportunity to come back and see what's working and see what was the best intentioned, and see where it might need to be tweaked or is more onerous than we intended. So over the last 2 or 3 months, I've heard some comments about the stormwater bylaw, having just been through it with the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission for the Public Safety Complex, which must have 9 different stormwater treatment systems on it. I can certainly feel some of the pain that some of the developers in town are probably feeling. But that doesn't mean that our town is so unique relative to this issue that a one-size-fits-all bylaw that might not be necessary in other communities may, be more pertinent here than in other places. But again, it has to be done with reasonableness in terms of the impact that it's making on developers. And I met with Mr. Bjorklund earlier this week, and I think some of the points that he's made make a lot of sense, but also need to respect our development offices in conservation and planning in terms of the impact to our groundwater and our water resources protection district. So it's something that, looking at as the work group moves along, and hopefully we can get some low-hanging fruit before town meeting to make these changes, so these guys don't have to live with it much longer.
Thank you. Yes.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, my name is Greg Tansey. I'm a registered professional engineer with Ross Engineering. I've been a registered professional engineer since 1993. I have been performing runoff analysis and practicing engineering since the mid-'80s. And I really appreciate the time. I really appreciate being able to speak on this matter. But as somebody who has worked with this as a professional, as a design engineer, what I want to do is just give you a little bit of an overview. This bylaw, what it does is, for the most part, it incorporates the DEP's BMP stormwater management standards. These standards were written for subdivisions. The bylaw then takes these subdivision standards and hypes them up. They add caveats. The most detrimental and onerous one is meeting the volumes of the 100-year storms in the pre- and post-development condition. If that's not bad enough, it applies it to a single-family residence. A 20,000 square foot lot just cannot support the infrastructure that's necessary. Some of the problems that we come in with is, in order to recharge the groundwater, the stormwater into the groundwater, you have to have pretreatment. Pretreatment from a lawn requires a 50-foot vegetative buffer strip. A residential lot just does not have that ability to discharge stormwaters over that area and to pre-treat it. Then it has to be recharged somehow. And on top of that, you have to have a 4-foot groundwater separation from the seasonal high groundwater to the bottom of the infiltration structure. And that 4-foot separation, for most areas here, you've got a 2 to 3 foot depth to groundwater. So the bottom of that infiltration system has to be 2 or 1 foot above the natural grade, the existing grade. And if that's another 2 feet thick and you have to have a foot of cover, you've got filling of 4 to 5 feet easily. It doesn't work. And it's extremely expensive. And the other issue is it's not proportionally
Before you
regulated.
leave that, and I apologize for interrupting, but I hear you say that. So what is the alternative solution, right? As opposed to just saying it doesn't work?
Okay, well, we've come up with some some structure, some language to the bylaw. The first thing that has to go is, there's no need for the 100-year storm to even be analyzed, especially for volume. And get rid of the, and I hate to use the word get rid of, but it needs to be eliminated, the meeting the pre and post conditions for the volume of runoff discharging off sites. As language needs to be shored up to define the parameters, the design parameters. What I've been finding here is some engineers, if you've got an HSG of C listed in that, in the TR 55, that's what you use, and that's
You
what...
just spoke Greek.
That is a hydraulic, it's a soil group rating that assesses the amount of permeability that a land surface has to absorb runoff. And what some people will say is, well, you know, I don't think it's that. I think it's this. And they look at the soil structure and the conditions, and as you know, every professional, whether it be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, everybody has a different view of things slightly. It's inherent, but there needs to be a uniform standard, and the standards out of TR 55 have been used for 30 years. They have worked very well. They have been, they've come under fire, they've been scrutinized, but they've pretty much held the test of time, and they work, and it's a fair standard, because depending upon who reviews these projects, you get a totally different review criteria, where, you know, things can be interpreted to an extreme, where other consultants might interpret it to a more practical basis. And the cost difference can be from, I've seen it from $9,500 to $2,000. I mean, and this is not fair. It's not fair for me to hand Steve a bill for 10 grand when a significantly larger project sails through for $2,200. And this has happened. And then Steve comes to me and says, hey, what are you doing? And I'm saying, well, this is what it says I have to do, and then it goes out to review, and it's still not good enough.
Yeah, the total bill that we're talking about is over $13,000.
I'm sorry, could you identify yourself?
Mark Winchester,
Okay.
Diamond Development. Yeah, the project that Greg was talking about, the total design bill was $13,000 and another $2,000 for review. So $15,000 before you stick a shovel in the ground for a single-family home.
What project was that?
265
No, it's
Beaver
still
Dam.
265
Beaver Dam. Somebody who is, any resident in this town who wants to put a garage, an addition, tear down a house, put up a new house, they could be looking at, and as I'm talking about a Form A lot, they can be looking at anywhere from $7,500 to $1,000 just to get the permit with this bylaw. And clearly, that wasn't the intent. And mitigating these 100-year storms has no environmental value. I mean, once in every 100 years, you hold a volume of water that sits in your front yard and your backyard. That's not going to protect an aquifer. The DEP uses a ½ inch of runoff or an inch of runoff, depending upon how sensitive an area of town you're in, times the impervious area, to recharge and to treat that. And that standard applies very well, and it applies to all storms almost, just about. And these higher storms, where you get the 2, the 10, the 100-year storms, once that runoff starts running off, most of that runoff is very clean runoff because it's such a large volume of water, you've got a dilutionary factor involved. It's usually the smaller storms that have the higher level of pollutants because you've got a smaller volume of water with a high, sweeping off that initial, they call it an antecedent, but it's the initial pollutants that are on the road, the sediment, any hydrocarbon or whatever, and you've got a high concentration of pollution in that. And this half-inch runoff treatment volume is geared to address that issue. And it does it very effectively. And it does it very practically. And there is language that could be introduced into the bylaw that would give a designing engineer good direction. It would give any reviewing consultant a set of parameters where they have to stay within, that they can't stray off to extremes.
Are we talking about single-family homes?
Yeah, yes.
That's the crux of the issue here. It's not about subdivisions and developments.
No,
it's about single-family homes.
It's about single-family homes. The memo that I came up with, and I believe that you have this, I sent this off to Greg Morse as well. It allows for, it's flexible enough for allowing for provisions for, say, small commercial projects where they would have to meet more rigorous performance standards. And if they're in a zone 2 or near an outstanding water resource area, then they would get kicked into the DEP standard policies, because commercial developments have higher levels of traffic flows and impervious areas, and it would warrant more regulation than a Form A lot, a single-family residence. I just didn't want projects near an ORW or commercial projects to slip through the cracks and get a free pass. That's not the intent of what I have written here. It's really gearing towards the single-family dwellings and just giving everybody the opportunity to make something that works, that protects the town, but doesn't break the bank, and it creates a level playing field. Getting back to certain languages, I mean, I spelled out certain infiltration rates, and I had mentioned the hydraulic soil grouping criteria, and that way, what it is what it is. It's from a competent source. It's a neutral source. It's not a regulator. It's not an engineer. It's not a developer. This is from the USGS standards that have been in use for 30-plus years, that have proven the test of time, and there's no reason to stray beyond those parameters, and that's what I've seen is happening here.
Can I kick in for just 1
Sure.
second there, if I can, Greg? One of the issues that we went through on this Beaver Dam Road lot had to do with the soils that were out there. And there's different stratification of the soils out there. There's an A layer, B layer, C layer, and we had a lens in there of bad material on this particular property. It was only a couple of inches, but there was a bad lens out there. And the way that the bylaw is written, we went out, we conducted percolation tests in what we call the C layer, which was down low, and that's where Greg designed all these infiltrator units to be. Unfortunately, that gets it too close to the groundwater because we want to get into the good soil, and the water is down in that good soil. But what happened, and I'm not getting into any names of any consultants or anything, but we had a consultant that had a disagreement on the soils, the soil classification that Greg used on this particular site. And they have New England Soils book or a map that shows every site in New England, and it tells you what those soils are. But we actually go out and dig on the particular property right where the stormwater system is going to go. And unfortunately, when we dug the holes, it was different than what showed in that book or the map. And the consultant thought maybe we should use what's on the map, but we knew that wasn't right because we dug these holes. So we went back and forth over, did Greg use the proper soils? Well, if we have a classification that says this is what you use, and I think that's what you're trying to get at.
That's right.
If you have a sandy loam, you use an infiltration rate of this. End of story. There's no chance to say, well, it might not be a C soil, it might be a D soil, you better redesign it and make sure it works for a D soil. Well, we redesigned it, and it works on either condition. You know, it would work either way, but he's putting his stamp on the plan. And another engineer could put a stamp on a different plan, but he basically is saying, in his professional opinion, this is a system that will work. And it's understandable that the consultant could say, well, you know, maybe you should use this over here, I feel better if you do that. So I'm not saying what he did was necessarily incorrect, but it needs to be clarified, like Greg said, exactly what's the criteria that we need to use in this particular bylaw. And we talked about the difference between doing a perk test and doing permeability studies. If you get into a single-family home and we have to do permeability studies for infiltration units, that's just going to drive the cost even higher to go do something like that, as well as groundwater mounding studies. You're talking for a single-family home. I mean, this is stuff that you do if you're doing a huge septic system and you want to find out how much you're going to change the groundwater by putting in thousands of gallons a day in the same area. Well, if you're doing mounding studies for a 100-year storm event, what do you do if you have a 25-year storm event the next day? It just blew the whole study. You can't tell, at least I don't think, in my opinion, you can tell exactly when it's going to rain that 100-year event and when the next event is going to happen. So some of these studies, we've got to kind of get out of there. You know, what's going to be required by whether it's one or more consultants, if it's in the bylaw, some of them are saying, hey, we disagree, it shouldn't be in there, but we have to review it this way because it is in the bylaw. So that's some of the stuff that we want to try and get taken out of there, and I know that's a lot of what Greg's letter was revolving around these soils and this different criteria.
Okay. Let me stop you two there because we have a lot of people in the audience here, and I know the board probably has questions they would like to ask as well. And if we can, it's 8:45 now, so maybe I can open it up to the audience to just get other comments. If the comments have already been made, just if there's a lot of people want to comment, let's try to stick to anything that's new, if you will, but I'll open it up to the public at this point to see if we have additional comments. Wow, that was quick.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
My name is Paul Marabito from Ross Engineering Company. I understand what the overall purpose of the stormwater bylaw is, and I remember several years ago when the board first started to draw the stormwater bylaw up. One of my comments to the board early on was I didn't think you needed the stormwater bylaw only because there were 5 or 6 other places where a design engineer would go to find the design criteria for any given type of stormwater system. The same is true today. When the BMPs came out in the late 90s, I believe, the state mandated that the towns clean up the water in the storm drains. Well, the towns don't do it because they don't have the money. So in some way, this is putting it on the back of the homeowner, but there's also case law that says that when we're designing the site, we can't grade a site in a manner that would have an adverse impact on abutting property. That's been around for a long, long time. Whether the bylaw states it or not, we still have to adhere to that, and we always do. The other thing is that every site is different. This is where we go out and we do our own soil testing. It's one of the reasons you do perk tests for a septic system, because you want to design the system based upon the actual soil conditions for that specific site. But one of the issues that I run into having to deal with clients all the time is most of them aren't aware of the stormwater bylaw, and we explain it to them, and the cost just raises their antennas quite a bit, because it is expensive. If you look at the smaller zones, like the R3 zone, if you increase the roof area of a house or a driveway by 25%, and on a small lot, a 25% increase is very easy to achieve. Most of that water you see today, whether it's pavement or roof area, is fairly clean water. And that's the majority of the water that we're having to treat. The BMPs take that roof runoff as clean water. But if you have a new lot, if you have a vacant lot for a new house, the majority of that lot, the impervious area is going to be your roof area and the driveway. And those runoff areas are fairly clean. But when you have to meet the groundwater separations, then that's when you get into mounds. The treatment costs are very high. And what you're doing is one lot here, one lot there. If you have existing houses, you know, you're going to treat the increase in the runoff. What you're trying to accomplish overall is very expensive, and it's clearly on the taxpayers of the town. You know, it's like you're trying to accomplish a piecemeal. It'll probably take 100 years or more to really see any benefit out of it. Someone made a comment that earlier that, well, you pass the regulations, see how it works, and maybe you should revisit it, you know, sometime down the road. I think this is a good time to revisit that whole bylaw and introduce some changes in it that make sense, both from an environmental point of view and also for the taxpayers in the town. You know, we're on the front line of this, and we see it every day. And drainage is a very, very subjective thing when it comes to doing a design. 3 people can look at it and come up with 6 different ways to do it. But the bottom line is the design engineer who puts a stamp on it is the one that's responsible for it. He's liable for it, and nobody else. If there's ever a problem, no one's going to sue the town or the homeowner. They're going to come right back to the design engineer. So I just, you know, I could go on and on, but I think this is a good opportunity to sit down and take a look at the regulations, perhaps introduce some very good and meaningful changes to it.
Thank you.
Mark Winchester again. As Patricia said, to go forward after a few years and see how these things are working out, you tend to see some of the unintended consequences of a law like this. The property that Steve and Greg were talking about that we're working on at 265 Beaver Dam Road, the consequence of the design, and Greg met every criteria of the stormwater, is that we have to clear every tree on a half-acre lot to create the stormwater management system. There'll be not one tree left because we have to regrade the entire site to hold the 100-year storm. So that's just one more thing that you find down the road when you start to implement these things. That just, it seems a little much to go through a process like that to hold this once in a 100-year event.
Thank you. I think we've heard that a couple of times now.
Okay.
Yes. Somebody else? Okay.
Bob Brewer, I would hope when you reconsider writing the bylaw that you would consider not requiring a consulting engineer to review, similar to a professional engineer designing a septic system. A professional engineer should also be competent enough and capable of designing stormwater, whatever that new regulation is, without the additional expense and the various interpretations of meeting the stormwater requirements.
Thanks, Will.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Okay.
If everybody's done, I'd like to try and just go for about 2 more minutes if I can.
On.
Same issue. Same issue.
Okay, we've heard the issue. I want to make sure my colleagues here have an opportunity to ask questions, okay? So it might be better if we do that, and then if what you want to say comes up during that, we can address it. So why don't I turn it over to Richard?
My question is more of like, for Laura, like procedural. What are the next steps? I mean, I think, we've heard this evening, I think we realize that there are some inefficiencies with the current bylaw. So, I'm an architect, I'm not a civil engineer, so a lot of what you were speaking about, kind of goes over my head. I try to understand it as best we can, and that's why we have the peer review, because they are basically our extension of the planning board to help us understand some of these things. So with that, is it to, like, basically formulate a new bylaw with all these groups, and then come before the planning board, and then we look at it? Or, I mean, what do you think are the next steps kind of going forward? I'm just curious.
Well, I guess the first thing would be to, just thinking out loud, would be to maybe distribute what Greg and Kevin Grady have given us, distribute that around town hall, see if there are comments there, send it out to the consulting engineers, see what their comments are, and then maybe get everybody in a room together and start trying to go through this section by section on the sections that need to be changed. And then coming back, I would want to keep Tricia and her office in the loop as much as possible, but, also coming back to the board because, I think you were the ones who really promoted this bylaw in the first place in terms of bringing it to town meeting. So I'm assuming that you would be involved in that way again, or however it's supposed to be handled through that whole town meeting process.
I do think you need to get I hate to create committees or anything, but I do think you need a cross-section of stakeholders in the room talking about this in order to reach some consensus that we could at least address. Because now what I hear, very good input from everybody, but it also raises a lot of other questions from people who might not be in this room. So, I'd like to hear what the Water Resources Commission maybe has to say about it. I'd like to hear what the individual town managers have to say about it. I'd like to hear what, obviously, single-family homes is not new, and so the DEP has addressed this for a lot of years, so I'd like to hear what they have to say about this distinction between single-family homes and subdivisions. It seems like we shouldn't reinvent the wheel if it's already been invented. So it seems like there's a lot of stakeholders that need to provide some input to this thing in order to zero in on the, the practical changes that maybe need to be made here. I'd be careful try not to design it just from sort of one side of the room, if you will. But that's just my thought on it.
Well, and I think, without speaking for the board, I think our experience has been with subdivisions. I mean, that's where subdivisions come before this board. Single-family lots, like, let's use your example, Beaver Dam Road, doesn't come before us to review that. So I think our experience...
the town plan.
It does come, yes, but I'm saying to the board. So we're not as, maybe, I should say up to speed, but we haven't seen some of the issues come up with the single-family homes as much as we're probably much more familiar when it comes to subdivisions, commercial properties, and those things that come before us. So I think it's an educational process for us, I guess is what I'm really trying to say, because we don't review all of the single-family homes, for the board anyway. So, but I do, just to put my 2 cents in, I think definitely from what I've heard tonight, it's something that needs to be reviewed, and I think that there should be some potential changes to it. And I think it's a balance, as so many people have said, between what's good for the environment and the town, and what's, you don't want to have it onerous for the individual proponent or taxpayer that's or person that's constructing this property. So it has to be a balance.
Yeah, couple of points. One is I think that, I think the Grady letter really brings it home, is we took stormwater for the state, designed for large projects, and we're committing to action, and we're putting it on small individual properties on it. I think when we came back up, and I guess I've got a history with this bylaw, more than most people, but because I kind of brought forth kicking and screaming a little bit on it, and then we tried to tweak it, and we spent a tremendous amount of time tweaking it The one thing that we're in the process of tweaking it that we didn't have is what we now have, and that's the actual experience with the small, single-house lots that would come back. Right, it hasn't been an impact as far as I've seen. I mean, does it have a financial impact? Yes, but if I'm looking at a subdivision, right, it's a spread over impact over, rather than come back up trying to put on a 20,000 or 40,000 square foot lot. So I think that there's a real opportunity to come back up and take advantage of what we've learned with the single-family lots, take a look and see where that fits into the bylaw, what needs to be or what should be tweaked. And I think the task force is probably the right way to do that, because there are more stakeholders than just the engineer and the property owner and the planning board.
Robert? Yeah, I think there are a lot of forces in play here, and, we're talking about things like separation from groundwater, soil permeability, that sort of thing, and that used to sort of forestall development of some land areas because of septic issues. Now, as the town sewer system spreads out and makes more inroads into the residential zones, you've got fewer lots that are kind of precluded from development because of septic issues. So that then brings to the fore the stormwater management issues that may start to be the gating element. I guess all I really want to go there from here is that there may be land in this town that is undesirable or unfeasible to develop, and that would be okay with me. I don't want to see every possible building lot in this town built on, unless it works. And so this is one of the things that may tell you whether or not a particular piece of land works. That said, I think there's definitely room for improvement in these regulations. I understand completely what's been said. Like Richard, I'm an architect and I've worked with engineers for 40-plus years. I have a lot of faith in them. And so the comment that was made about the review, to kind of jump around, not being necessary in terms of design review, I'd give that some credibility personally. I think an engineer designing one of these systems, putting his stamp, his reputation on the design, to me, that carries a lot of weight. I'm not necessarily sure that it needs to be second-guessed or further reviewed beyond that point. I also think that the crafting of whatever new language is going to work for all parties definitely is a group effort, definitely has to include constituencies that represent the developers, very heavily represent the engineering community, certainly take into account the concerns of conservation and people like the North and South Rivers Watershed Association, town planner, building department, but is in the end based on solidly crafted and agreed upon engineering principles, almost more than anything else. So that's it.
You're up, Ann.
I'm up, okay. Sometimes I think we can overregulate ourselves, and it is very interesting to hear what people have to say about this. It does definitely need to be tweaked. There's no question about it. We've run into situations with these lots that, in reality, it's almost unenforceable. When something is built, if it's not built correctly, how do you fix it? Sometimes we make these regulations so complicated and so onerous that people have a way of sort of sashaying around it. But I agree that we do need to do something, that we need to put together the stakeholders and come up with something that is less onerous, keep it, just disturb. We need to change the size of the lot. It needs to go up to 40,000 square feet. We need to get rid of the 100-year storm thing, because, unless you're living in South Texas where they're getting 12 inches of rain tomorrow. So, I mean, if it happens, we're all flooded. And doing something for a 100-year storm isn't going to make a bit of difference, to my estimation. And again, to reiterate, I think we can overregulate ourselves to the point of pointlessness, which made no sense, but at any rate.
Yeah, I think like what Ann said, we've all seen the stormwater regulations that are like, this thick, and I think the town doesn't have, as was said here tonight, the enforcement of that. And unfortunately, it only becomes an issue when there's a problem, after the fact, when the neighbor or whoever says they didn't do it correctly, then we get involved, and we have to go back and say, okay, they didn't install this, and there's all back and forth. So I think it's, just to put Ann's point, is like, it can be so onerous and so complicated, no one can really police it or, adhere to it, basically, because it's so confusing. So, to make it simpler, I guess, would be...
Right, keep it simple.
A good goal
Right.
of this whole process.
I mean, again, to follow up, I think we are over-regulating ourselves to the point of no return. There is just too much regulation, and we have to streamline it, we have to make it easier, more palpable, and certainly not onerous on whomever.
But I also think that there's a point that you've got to hold to that does minimize damage, for lack of a better word, to neighboring properties. And what's happening is, it's a different world. There's more density. There are larger houses on smaller lots. You can do it because of the sewer. That's one reason. The market maybe has changed. You're not doing 1,200-1,500 square foot homes anymore. Everybody's doing 2,500 square foot homes. So it's a little bit of a different ballgame, which demands a little bit different reaction in order to achieve your goals. And one goal certainly is protection of neighboring properties.
I couldn't agree with you more. I had that happen to me. And we had also, years ago, looked at the possibility of having a regulation, again, here we go with regulations, about the size of structures on specific lots.
Right.
And, that's something that we had thought about years ago, and that went nowhere. It's all a matter of personal choice. But also, too, if you have the wherewithal to put a 7,000 square foot house on a half-acre lot, well, then you have to bear the burden of what you reap as it is, so.
Yeah.
Yep. I think I agree with Bob here, and that we need to strike the balance, right, is what it's all about. And I understand that an individual owner of an individual property sees it as a burden to conform with these particular regulations, but his neighbors may not see it as a burden. And, it may not be seen as a burden if he's within a water resources district and it's affecting the surface water. So I think there are multiple views that have to be addressed here. And, this 100-year storm as the design event may be the wrong thing for a single-family home. But again, people have been building these homes for a long time, and somebody has already sort of addressed this issue at least, and we should bring, what is available in the Commonwealth to bear on this as well, in terms of what other standards people use, other towns, what the DEP uses for single-family homes, and sort of the best management practices for stormwater too. So I would just encourage that we try to bring that kind of knowledge to the table, that we try not to sort of invent a change sort of in a vacuum here. And that's why I think we need the right group of people at the table. And I should say this again, we really appreciate you bringing this forward and identifying, because without people saying we're running into the real world problems that come from these regulations that have been built, there's a room to modify those and change those. We just need to do it deliberately and sort of eyes wide open when we do it. So I appreciate everybody's comments today on bringing these issues forward, and now I'm going to let you said you had 2 more minutes, so.
Hopefully wrap it up quickly. Well, I'm glad that most of the people that you see in the room are builders and developers in the town of Situate, and we're trying to adhere to this particular bylaw, so it is nice to know that we're not going to be able to flood our neighbors out, because most of us have 3 or 4 abutters to each project. The unfortunate part is the 3 or 4 neighbors can flood us out, because there's nothing in the bylaw, if they have an existing house, that says their water can't come to us. So we'll make sure that we don't flood them. It'd be great if we had something that said they couldn't flood us. The reason I bring that up...
That might be another level of change that would be a little harder
And
to
I'll
do.
tell you, it actually is another level of change, and it's actually called a Watershed Master Plan. And it's part of the Stormwater Management Summary, which is part of the CRS program. And it has a number of different elements in the program, and one of them is stormwater management regulations, which is the stormwater bylaw. That's only one part of this management summary. The second part is the Watershed Master Plan. I know it's not the political thing to do, but the Watershed Master Plan actually puts the stormwater burden on everybody in the town of Situate. So you can actually craft those regulations so that people with existing houses would also have to meet some burden of taking care of stormwater. Definitely not the politically correct thing to do. There's also part of it is erosion and sedimentation control regulations, which, as we do construction, we have to meet all that stuff now. It's all with NEPTIS permits and things like that. And we do take care of most of the erosion and stuff in town. I think we have huge problems with that during construction. And there's water quality regulations. And as you go through this, which I just got, and I would recommend, it's like 25 pages, I'd recommend that each planning board member pick up this program, or this pamphlet right here. Laura, if you've got it, you can give them a copy, or I'll be glad to give you the copy I've got. It appears to me as though when whoever wrote the stormwater bylaw picked up this manual, and what this manual does is basically, this is a new one, but it's basically mirrors the one that we had before. It says that there's a maximum of 755 credit points available in the CRS program for a town that implements each of these individual pieces in their bylaw. And a particular, for instance here, out of 755 potential points, I'm going to read one section which talks about the credit points for the size of what you regulate. And it says, this is what you can put in your bylaw. It says, size, you can get 110 points if all development in town is regulated. Or you can get 90 points if all development is regulated except for single-family residences. So you lose 20 points. So to have the CRS program lose 20 points and put that burden on everybody who's building a new house to be regulated by this, to me, is definitely overburdensome on those people. And it does say, and we talked about this the other day, about what size do you actually have in this bylaw. Norwell, it's a minimum of 40,000 square feet of disturbance. Laura and I talked about this a little bit, and we come out with like a 20,000 square foot amount of disturbance. If you're over that, you'd kick it into a stormwater. If you're under that type of disturbance, you may be exempt. And in here, it's under the 90 points, it says, except for single-family residences, parcels of 1/2 acre or less, or increases in impervious areas of 5,000 square feet. So that's right around the criteria that I think, and I'll speak pretty much for everybody in here, for single-family homes, we can pretty much meet that threshold or be under that threshold if we can get the bylaw to get to that point. And again, the difference is like 20 CRS points. It's not a heck of a lot, and I think we can actually find the 20 points somewhere else in this program here to pick it back up, so you actually don't lose any points. We'll just shift them around and maybe put a little bit of less burden on the individual trying to build on their small lot. And with that, I'd love to be part of the group that gets together and sits down and figures out how to fix this, and I would hope that we might get a planning board member or two as well involved in that, as well as, you know, the engineers, I'm sure, would be glad to help out and fix this, and if the consulting engineers are involved, that's great too. We don't want to pick it completely apart, we just want to make it fair, that's all. And I really appreciate everybody's time. I know everybody else does. I appreciate everybody else coming in as well to at least show that it's not just myself that's it's affecting. It's going to affect everybody that's building in town.
Okay. It seems like we're at a stopping point here. We're not going to get much further tonight. It does, and I think I would probably turn this over to you, Laura, just to think about how to coordinate an effort to do this going forward. But what would be interesting to know is kind of what's our timeline here if we want to do anything for the spring meeting? What kind of window of opportunity do we really have here?
Well, I think we have a couple of months to work on it.
2 months, like
but,
December. Got a lot of people to coordinate with in order to do that.
Getting past that, it's going to make it tighter to get it to town meeting. But I think we could probably get a lot done in that time. I mean, there's a lot that's been suggested already that we can chew on, but I think we do need to have kind of a good balanced group, like you were saying, and include some of the other stakeholders besides the developers. So.
Maybe we can ask you to sort of at least put that together as a draft and circulate it to the members here, and we'll try to collectively provide what we think is the right mix, and maybe some of the key questions to address as well.
Okay, that's great.
Does that sound right to you guys?
Yeah, it would be interesting to find out what changes Cohasset made and how those changes are working.
Absolutely.
We could specifically get that information out of the folks
I
in
know it
Cohasset.
became very heated in Cohasset.
Oh, yeah.
There were a lot of,
I think it's tied in a knot.
That's saying it lightly that it was heated.
Yeah.
But can you tell us how what the result was?
Oh, I'm sure we can do
We won't worry
that.
about the process at this point, but
I'm
just
sure we can do that.
figure out what they changed with respect to single-family homes in particular.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I do a lot of this stormwater work in Cohasset, and I can tell you that the number one change that made that bylaw work is that it's reviewed in-house. Paul Shea, the agent, reviews it in-house. And once you take the array of every different consultant interpreting every different thing on a different basis out of the equation, it becomes much
Did they eliminate the 100-year storm criteria?
No, they didn't.
Did they eliminate the pretreatment runoff criteria? I guess what I'm trying to understand is whether the changes they made sort of coincide with the recommendations you're proposing here. And that would be a good analysis to sort of put together. I hear you about the review, but I'm just trying to understand what kind of specific changes got made and how they compare to what, has been even floated out here today.
Yeah, and again, Cohasset's one town. Like Laura says, there's a lot of towns that have different stormwater bylaws, different criteria as well. And a lot of them have different minimum standards. Like I say, Norwell is 40,000 square feet. I think we're looking for 20,000, which, I think coincides with what you've got in the manuals here. So it may not be that every change is the same as what Cohasset does, but we'll certainly look into it.
Yeah, well, I would think we want our group to do that and look at the other kinds of information that are out there on single-family homes as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know Steve mentioned about, if the bylaw went in, was it 2008?
Yeah,
10,
it's about
it was
in
10,
2000.
I think.
Well, the regulations went in 2010, so it wasn't really used very much before 2010.
Okay. To get a listing of, like you said, the 30 or 40 or however many there have been since that, and what the impact and just it'd be interesting, like cost and what was done. Yeah, I know that's a lot of work for the group or the committee. I don't want to put that burden on you.
You mean the cost of all the infrastructure that was put in?
Yeah.
Maybe we could get like one typical property. I mean, it sounds like Beaver Dam Road had some special issues to it. A lot of these properties are more or less marginal. They're, sometimes close to wetlands. They sometimes need a lot of infrastructure to make them work.
Well, it sounds like Pat had a number of them that he thought actually benefited from the stormwater regulations, so that sort of that comparison would probably be good, not just to one end of the spectrum, but both ends of the spectrum, if you will. if you pick a lot or two on one side, maybe Pat can bring a couple of lots on the other side.
Yeah, where these three worked really well, as an example.
There's also a lot of procedural things that can change in there, you know, how many copies you send in, what size triggers this, and there's a lot of things, who takes it, planning board or conservation, so there are a lot of those things that could clean it up and make it easier to understand. And
I guess I'd like to make sure that from the perspective of the onerous part, right? Sort of doing the 80-20 rule here and make sure we at least get the key issues, and I don't know if that means it's the 100-year storm design period or it's the pretreatment runoff or what those elements are, but it would seem to me you want to sort of, if we've got a limited amount of time, you want to sort of prioritize and say, these two things, if we change these two things, it gets, 90% better. You might just want to sort of sort it out that way a bit.
Yeah, I think if it's addressed that way to town meeting, that this is a moving target still and we're working on fixing it, but these are the changes we'd like to make at the Springtown meeting, expect that there will be some more coming, then I think that would probably fly. And that's really simple to do. As well, I know there's no fee for filing for one of these permits, so don't everybody get mad at me, but there should be some type of a fee just for the filing of the permit, like every other special permit or anything we get, because there are administrative things that have to be done. So I know that's one thing that Laura wanted to try and get in there. I don't think anyone has a problem with that as much as what is it that we're really designing and what's the cost of that design. But if there's a fee for the permit, that's...
Well, I think that's, I'm not sure that's, such a major issue.
No,
but
they shouldn't.
I'd like to hear from the consulting engineers also, because I know they had some areas that they really thought were very awkward to apply. And it wasn't that they wanted to be difficult, it's the way the bylaw was written made it hard to work with it. So, maybe that would make some of this process a little more efficient. We are using the consulting engineers in most of the applications, and the reason for that is because typically they do find, maybe a half dozen things that do need to be adjusted or changed, and the value of this is really, only as good as the plans that you get. So if you want to protect the town, I think that's one way to do it, is to make sure that we're all getting as good plans as we can, which is not to say that the bylaw doesn't need to be tweaked. I mean, I think we all agree that it does. But I'm not...
Well, the review
yeah,
thing also
anyway.
comes back to sort of how Mr. Tanzi started today, sort of running into what sounded like Greek when you were talking about, HSG ratings and all of that. I think that's a piece of what we on the board want to make sure that, there's a valid review of it, and we don't feel competent, even as a registered engineer for more than 30 years, right? I don't feel competent to do that kind of thing either, so I think that's why we sort of try to lean on, consulting engineers, particularly and mostly, I think, in the subdivision reviews and all of that. Maybe not as much, and I'm not sure, but maybe not as much in the single-family homes.
It's usually been about $1,000 cost most of the time on the single-family homes, and I'm not trying to generalize. I'm sure, maybe there is one that charges more, and they shouldn't, and we should be on top of that. We should know about that. So any feedback that you have, that's, something that we'll definitely listen to. But in general, it's not a tremendous, huge cost just for that consulting engineer review.
And I think a lot of times we've got a better product because of the review.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got 2 engineers looking at something.
Yeah. So, anyway, thanks.
So you'll
Well, I'll make a recommendation
by
for
the
this
horns.
group. I'll coordinate with Tricia, because I know she has wanted to be closely involved with this, and then hopefully we'll get this up and running as quickly as possible.
Does any member of the board wish to participate?
I don't know.
Okay. We've got a volunteer.
A victim.
It's amazing how I could raise it when it was twisted.
behind your back.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
I appreciate your time.
We appreciate your comments. It's very helpful, I think, and hopefully we'll make some positive changes here that work for
It's right
everybody.
here. Approved, right.
Thank you.
Date.
Nice job.
Okay. I think we're done. We're waiting for Bob's motion.
I'll second Bob's motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.